She stood across from me, her hands curled around a chipped coffee mug like it was the only thing tethering her to the ground. The morning light cut across her face, softening it, almost making it easier to believe she was being honest. Almost. If we're going to fix this, she said slowly, like she'd rehearsed it, I need full transparency. Passwords, accounts, total access. Her voice didn't waver. That's what got me. Not the demand itself. I'd offered her that kind of access before, years ago, before trust had been something we negotiated instead of something we just lived inside. No, what got me was her calm, practiced tone. Like she wasn't asking. She was declaring the rules of a new game, one she'd already started playing without me. I nodded, gave her the kind of slow, confused agreement that made me seem cooperative, reasonable. Okay, I said, keeping my tone light, casual. If that's what you need. She smiled, touched my wrist. I think I was supposed to feel reassured. But something inside me clicked, a quiet mechanism snapping into motion. The kind you don't hear until long after the trap has sprung. The woman standing in front of me, asking for total access, wasn't trying to rebuild trust. She was staging control. For the next week, everything between us felt weirdly smooth. She stopped snapping at me over tiny things, didn't roll her eyes when I was late to dinner, started making real coffee again instead of the instant stuff she used when she was passive-aggressively mad. On the surface, it looked like healing. But I've rebuilt things before. Fences, furniture, engines, and I know what real repair looks like. It's messy, loud, a little frustrating. This wasn't repair. This was theater. It was quiet. She had my passwords now, my synced calendars, my cloud storage, the shared business email, even the project folders I kept in Google Drive under her name for easier billing. She didn't ask questions about what she found, which told me she was finding exactly what she expected, or what she needed. 3 nights later, I watched her type something on her phone while I sat across the room. The screen cast a faint glow on her face, her expression calm, focused, a little cold. When I walked over to refill my glass, she angled the screen away without even thinking. That reflex wasn't fear. It was training. She was too comfortable in the light to flinch. That's when I started saving things. Not out of fear, out of curiosity, out of strategy. Because if she wanted transparency, I'd give her exactly what she asked for. Eventually, she started calling it a new chapter. Her tone softened whenever she used the phrase, like a therapist had given her the words and told her to try them on for size. This is our reset, she said one morning, folding laundry with clinical detachment. If we can get back to 0, we can build something better. I watched her fold one of my dress shirts, one she hadn't touched in months, and I nodded like I believed her. Like I didn't notice that she was pairing it with slacks I hadn't worn since last year, and smoothing them with just enough care to make me wonder what kind of photo they'd be perfect for. She wanted full access, so she got it. Every device, every document. I let her change the passwords herself so she could feel the illusion of control she craved. She took to it with unnerving enthusiasm, synced everything, set up new folders, created labeled archives, even updated our shared drive with a new folder called Relationship Rebuild. Inside it, she added PDFs of journal entries, typed, dated, obsessively formatted. Not hers, mine. Or rather, versions of mine. Observations she claimed I'd shared verbally, now documented for clarity. Small emotional failings blown into patterns, moments reframed as instability. Each one cleanly timestamped and labeled. She wasn't documenting the past. She was preparing evidence. Still, I said nothing. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed to know how far she was willing to go. Because when someone you once trusted begins scripting your downfall, it pays to study their handwriting. And she was writing in bulk. Her new phone had a hidden folder. I only saw it once, a quick glimpse in the corner of a reflected screen. It was an app designed to look like a calculator, but I recognized the interface. Disguised storage. She used it like she'd used it before. That same week, I got a notification on our shared business account. Quarterly export complete. It wasn't set to auto-export. She'd triggered it. We'd built the company together, brick by digital brick. She had always been meticulous with documentation, receipts, contracts, licensing, but only when it benefited the work. Now she was repurposing the same skills, not for the business, but for something else entirely. I let her. Because it's one thing to feel betrayed. It's another to let the betrayal finish writing itself in your presence. Let her type. Let her archive. Let her believe she's building something. Because I was starting to map the foundation of her story, and I was already 2 steps beneath it. It was supposed to be a routine review. End of quarter. I ran a full export of our shared business expenses to prep for taxes. I wasn't looking for anything, not yet. I just wanted numbers. Clean, objective figures that had always been neutral ground between us. But line 47 caught me off guard. $7,500. Labeled Consulting, Armitage and Feldman LLP. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it at first. I cross-referenced the charge, time-stamped 8 weeks ago. That was 2 weeks before she sat me down for the transparency talk, before the journals, before the fake calm. I opened a new tab and looked up the firm. Family Law, based downtown. The kind of place that didn't list prices publicly because every invoice was a custom attack plan. She'd paid a retainer. With our business card. That's when my breath caught, not panicked, just slow, measured, like my instincts had just stood up and walked into the room beside me. I didn't say anything that night. We ate dinner quietly. She asked about a new vendor deal, complimented the grilled asparagus like it mattered. I nodded, chewed, waited. The next morning, I slipped into our business drive, folder by folder. I wasn't looking for receipts anymore. I was looking for fingerprints, and I found them. Subtle changes in edit histories, file names slightly adjusted. One proposal dated twice. A timeline that no longer matched when it was actually sent to a client. Sloppy mistakes, buried under routine. Then I checked her desktop sync. Buried inside a nested folder labeled Admin Archive was a draft of a file I hadn't touched. It looked like a normal contractor agreement, until I read the recipient line. It was addressed to Armitage and Feldman, the same firm from the $7,500 charge. The language was sanitized, neutral, but the intent was clear. She was documenting internal conflict in the business, implied instability, unresponsiveness, intermittent emotional volatility. She wasn't leaving me. Not yet. She was staging abandonment. And she was using our company to do it. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. My heartbeat didn't spike. No adrenaline. Just a quiet resignation folding in over itself like dry paper. She wanted transparency? She was about to get the kind that burns, because now I had proof, not just of intention, but of timing, of orchestration. And I was done waiting for the next move. It was my turn. The message came in casually, as if it were nothing more than a calendar update. Reminder, your therapy appointment with Dr. Hess is at 3 o'clock today. Please don't be late. It's important. No signature. No emoji. Just cool efficiency. I stared at the text for a long time, my phone heavy in my hand. I hadn't booked the appointment. She had. It was framed as a gesture of support. She'd called it a neutral space, where we could both reflect and grow. I remember how she smiled when she mentioned Dr. Hess. Said he was excellent with communication dynamics. I went. Of course I went. What else could I do? Declining would have looked like avoidance, like guilt. Dr. Hess was polite, measured, professional in a way that put distance between us. He asked questions that felt preloaded, as if he was navigating toward a shape already carved out in advance. I answered carefully, truthfully. I tried not to shape the narrative, just present it. It wasn't until later, long after the sessions ended, that I saw his name again, this time in a legal draft she left open on her laptop by mistake. Character witness, Dr. Lionel Hess, Ph.D., will testify to observed emotional instability, disorganized thought patterns, lack of follow-through. She had handed him a version of me, months ago. I had been walking into a box she'd already built and sealed, expecting me to fit inside it like I'd crawled in willingly. That same week, our company received a notice, internal compliance audit requested, by her cousin. She claimed it was a random check. It's just good practice, she said at dinner, slicing into roasted chicken like the news was barely worth mentioning. It protects both of us. But I knew her cousin, barely qualified to manage his own taxes, let alone audit a digital firm. His presence wasn't about compliance, it was about intimidation, or more precisely, discreditation. The pattern was emerging too clearly to ignore. Therapist? Staged. Audit? Staged. Even our mutual friends had gone quiet. One, a former college roommate of mine, finally returned my call. Her voice was careful, brittle with something unsaid. "She's been concerned," she said. "She mentioned you've been under a lot of stress. Said things at home were tense." I thanked her and ended the call before I let my voice slip. She hadn't just isolated me. She'd infected the narrative around me. And while she thought I was caught in her version of events, I had started recording my own. Every message, every file she altered, every login she initiated, every change in her tone. Because narratives only work when no one's watching. And I was watching everything now. It started with a backdated invoice, innocuous on the surface. An old services receipt for a consulting call that never happened, filed under a dead client's folder. It shouldn't have raised flags, but I remembered every hour billed in that quarter, because I'd been rebuilding our revenue after she'd burned through a client retainer without notifying me. So I opened the folder. Inside were a series of PDFs, all labeled in the same sterile format. Invoice_2018, agreement_rev2, transfer_exec. The last one caught my attention. Transfer_exec.pdf. I clicked, expecting a draft subcontractor form. What opened instead stopped me cold. It was a draft agreement, and signed unfiled, but written as if I'd already agreed to it. The language was precise, legal, polished. It detailed a voluntary reassignment of my ownership stake in the business to her, effective 6 months prior. Filed, supposedly, with mutual consent. Her signature was on the line already, neatly typed in, digitally placed. Mine was blank. There was even a notary line, backdated. The field left open, like she hadn't found someone yet or hadn't decided when to use it. It wasn't just bold. It was deliberate. This was fraud dressed in professionalism, hidden in the detritus of our shared Dropbox, camouflaged under a layer of assumed disinterest. She hadn't counted on me going that deep. I sat back, staring at the screen, my throat dry. This wasn't about emotional tension anymore. She wasn't just trying to paint me as unstable. She was trying to cut me out, professionally, financially. Our company hadn't just been our livelihood. It had been my idea, my blueprint. She'd helped build it, yes, but I'd designed the foundation. I'd brought in the anchor clients. I'd architected the system she now used to stage my removal. And she thought I wouldn't notice? No, she counted on my exhaustion, on my distraction, on me trusting her enough not to look too closely. But trust isn't blindness, and exhaustion isn't defeat. I downloaded the file, pulled the metadata, logged the timestamps. The document had been created on her work laptop, updated 4 times, last accessed 2 days before she sent me that cheerful, reset, dinner invitation. My jaw tightened as I stared at the screen. She didn't expect me to push back, but I wasn't preparing for a confrontation. I was preparing to dismantle, quietly, surgically. This wasn't about a marriage anymore. This was about theft, fabrication, a quiet attempt to replace me. And I don't let anyone steal what I built. I didn't confront her. That would have satisfied her version of events. Another outburst to pin on the wall, another moment to feed her, emotional instability, narrative. I stayed quiet, cordial, routine. The next morning, I called Peter Langston, my corporate attorney of 10 years. Calm, quiet, not flashy, but surgical. I gave him everything. The PDF, the payment to Armitage and Feldman, the synced calendar entries, even the therapy appointment with Hess, along with his unexpected appearance in her affidavit draft. Peter listened, didn't interrupt. When I was finished, he asked only one question. "Are you ready for precision?" I told him I was past ready. 2 days later, she received the cease and desist. I wasn't in the room when it happened, but I knew exactly when it hit, because she stopped mid-text at the kitchen counter. Her face didn't crumple. It froze. Like someone who'd rehearsed every possible reaction except the one she was actually having. Peter's letter was brief. It addressed the attempted ownership transfer, cited the unfiled draft, the backdating, and the breach of fiduciary responsibility. Then it escalated, requesting a full forensic audit of all shared accounts, and warning that any further unilateral action would trigger immediate legal protections on my side. She didn't speak for nearly an hour. Just paced. Then, as if on cue, she tried to recover. "This is just a misunderstanding," she said, her voice carefully shaped into wounded confusion. "I thought you said we were rebuilding. Why would you escalate this?" I looked at her then. Not with anger. Not even sadness. With certainty. "We are rebuilding," I said. "Just not the same thing you thought we were." She blinked, tilted her head, as if that sentence hadn't made sense. Because it hadn't, to her version of reality. But she understood enough to know the game had shifted. Later that day, she called the firm she'd paid, tried to reverse the retainer. Too late. The timeline was already unraveling. Her audit request from her cousin? Pulled, quietly abandoned. The therapist? Suddenly unavailable for testimony, likely warned off by Peter's subtle mention of professional conflict. Everything she'd constructed, her version of the story, the calm demeanor, the trail of selective records, was now exposed to daylight. Not through confrontation, through precision. And I never had to raise my voice, because power isn't loud, it's prepared. Her voice cracked for the first time on the stand, not from emotion, but from calculation breaking under weight. She wasn't expecting the judge to ask about the retainer, or the business transfer draft, or why her cousin had initiated a compliance audit in the same week she filed her initial claims. I wasn't surprised. Peter had made sure every detail was filed cleanly, early, and with enough context to show motive without overplaying it. He let the evidence speak. All I had to do was sit still. She tried to redirect at first, talked about our marriage, claimed we'd mutually agreed to transition roles in the company, brought up stress. Her journal entries were introduced, precise, curated accounts of emotional unease, framed like confessionals. Peter let her finish. Then he submitted the metadata. The documents had been written in one burst, days before her filing, labeled as entries, but stored in a folder titled Case Prep. It wasn't just that they were false, it was that they were so clearly manufactured. The judge didn't need a speech. She saw the architecture of the betrayal laid out cleanly. Her tone shifted, less sympathetic, more procedural. That's when it turned. Her demand for asset division was rejected. She was removed from the business formally, her bank access revoked. The judge ordered a halt on any future attempts to restructure company ownership without my consent. And her attorney? Requested to be dismissed from counsel the following week. Word spreads fast in tight legal circles. No one wants to stake their name on someone willing to fabricate timelines and forge financial agreements. The moment it was over, she avoided looking at me. Her posture didn't collapse, but it tightened, like someone trying not to fall while still pretending they had the high ground. I didn't speak to her. There was nothing left to say. She tried to overwrite me with paper, with silence, with carefully shaped narratives. And in the end, the truth didn't just survive. It dismantled her version of events, cleanly, publicly, and she left that courtroom with nothing she hadn't earned. Not revenge. Not destruction. Just the cold accounting of exposed intention. And fallout, real and lasting. The kind that don't fade when the story changes. After the hearing, she moved through the world differently. Not with shame. She was never one to show that. But with calculation dulled by something new, recognition. People knew. Not everyone. But enough. Mutual friends stopped engaging in neutral check-ins. A few sent texts that read like apologies in disguise. Too little, too late. The business community, though, responded faster. We weren't a household name, but we weren't obscure either. And word of a stage transfer attempt doesn't fade quietly in our circles. Clients she'd personally managed requested reassignments. Two even called to ask if we were dissolving the company. I assured them we were not. But she was no longer part of it. Peter had overseen a full internal restructuring. Her credentials were removed, her accounts disabled. A formal statement was issued. She was no longer affiliated with the firm. No gossip. No blame. Just clarity. But clarity can be louder than scandal when everyone already suspects. She tried once, about a week later, to reverse the tide. She sent me an email. Short. Controlled. Almost clinical. If there's a way to address this outside court filings, I'd prefer that route. We both made mistakes. Let's try to maintain what we can. I didn't respond. There was nothing to maintain. She didn't want resolution. She wanted salvage. A rope to cling to after the deck had already gone under. Meanwhile, I adjusted. Quietly. Accounts secured. A new digital architecture built. The company began to breathe without her weight inside it. Meetings ran smoother. Vendor calls less chaotic. And I noticed something else, too. My own mind, less clouded. I'd been second-guessing myself for months, feeling foggy, disoriented in conversations, noticing absences in places where trust used to live. But now, each day moved with a little more precision. Because survival after betrayal isn't about dramatic reinvention. It's about subtraction, clearing what was false so what remains can be real. She thought she could write my downfall in silence, but I had learned to read even her quietest lines, and now, the silence belonged to me. I didn't tell anyone I'd won, not outright. That wasn't the point. The point was that I still had my company, my reputation, and my dignity. Not because I'd fought harder, but because I'd prepared better. She'd mistaken calm for weakness, mistaken transparency for gullibility, and she never saw the difference between being silent and being strategic. I rebuilt the firm's infrastructure with brutal clarity. Security protocols doubled, access logs tracked, external compliance firm brought in, not her cousin this time, but a vetted partner with no ties. Every system she tried to use as a weapon, I turned into a shield. And my social circle? That adjusted too. The ones who had disappeared stayed gone. That was fine. I preferred it. Better a clean fracture than the ache of loyalty retracted behind polite excuses. But a few real ones stuck. Quiet calls. No pity, just awareness. One of them, a long-time client who'd heard whispers but waited for facts, reached out a few weeks after the court decision. "You handled that cleanly," he said. "She underestimated you." I told him I didn't take it personally. That wasn't a lie. It was surgical, not emotional. And that's what made it effective. I was open once, hopeful, transparent. Now, I still believe in transparency, but not the kind she demanded. Not the version that weaponizes openness into ammunition. Now, transparency means clean contracts, logged communications, real boundaries, and firewalls, everywhere they matter. I don't raise my voice anymore. Don't try to explain myself to people who've already chosen what they want to believe. I've learned that power isn't the loudest man in the room. It's the one who already has a backup plan for the building. She wanted me reactive. She needed me disoriented. But I built systems while she built narratives, and now I walk through the wreckage of her strategy without ever looking back. Because I didn't just survive. I endured, and I did it under full transparency. There was no dramatic exit, no final scream, no teary sidewalk confrontation. Just a quiet courier envelope she had to sign for formal notification that all business entitlements under her name were revoked, effective immediately. It wasn't just legality. It was closure, signed and sealed. I didn't watch her receive it, but I imagined the moment, the pause, the signature, the slow recognition that this wasn't just a setback. This was the end of her playbook. The woman who had demanded full transparency had operated entirely in shadow. She curated perception, manufactured conflict, rehearsed concern. She told therapists I was emotionally reactive while editing documents to reframe ownership. And now she stood alone with the last envelope that didn't offer her control, but consequence. She tried reaching out once more, another email. "None of this needed to happen. If you had just been open, if you had just listened." I didn't finish reading it, just archived it. I'd listened plenty. To her tone, her contradictions, her timing. And I'd been open enough to let her believe I was unaware, unarmed, unprepared. That was her mistake. She believed deception worked best in silence, but truth works best in structure. She had constructed a false timeline, expecting me to fall into it. But timelines cut both ways, and mine was airtight, documented, unimpeachable. Her friends, the ones she fed the story to? Some circled back in whispers, unsure of what they'd supported. Others just faded out, their silence a quiet admission of complicity. I didn't chase any of them. Let silence speak. Let precision finish what trust once began. She wanted full transparency, so I gave it to her. Not through arguments or desperate pleas, through receipts, through legal filings, through a strategy she never saw coming. And by the time the lights were on and the courtroom quieted, the only person exposed was the one who started it all. Truth doesn't need a stage. It just needs a window. And she was standing in it. Some victories don't feel like wins. They feel like silence after sirens. That's what those weeks were like. No messages. No dramatics. Just space. Long, clean, and unfamiliar. I didn't rush to fill it. Didn't distract myself with travel or celebration. I stayed in the house. Kept the routines. Brewed the same coffee I used to make for both of us, only now in a smaller pot. The company was leaner, sharper. Clients trusted me more, not less. Some even thanked me, not in words but in loyalty. Renewed contracts. Referrals. The firm we built together hadn't just survived, it had shed her like an old skin. I kept the calendar clear. No social catch-ups. No rebound dinners. Just work, exercise, and the occasional evening where I sat on the back porch and said nothing out loud. That silence had weight. It reminded me that not all pain screams. Some pain teaches. I revisited the systems she had tried to control. The document access trails. The shared finance tools. I re-engineered every one. Added redundancies. Updated permissions. Installed tracking that didn't just secure me, it made sure no one else would ever attempt to rewrite my story behind my back again. Because that's what she had done. Not just misled. She tried to author me out of my own life. But now, every part of that life was locked into clarity. No ambiguity. No invisible edits. A few friends, the real ones, stopped by. Quiet support. No awkward questions. Just understanding. One of them asked gently, "You ever think about starting over?" I knew what he meant. A new relationship. A different kind of trust. I told him the truth. "Eventually," I said. "But not yet. Starting over isn't about finding someone new. It's about becoming someone unshakable." And I wasn't finished building that man yet. I was still learning how to move through a life not shaped around anticipation, waiting for the next small betrayal, the next correction, the next recalibrated silence. Now I was rebuilding a world where silence was mine again. Not hers. Mine.